how to thrive as a coach when your competition is AI and AI is getting better and better by the day. Hi, I'm Morris from CreateGrowProfit.com, and today I'm talking to Dr. D from Blue Egg Leadership. D, thank you so much for being here today. Where are you calling in from?
Thank you, Morris. I'm excited to be here. I'm calling from Dallas, east of Dallas, Texas.
How did you come up with the name Blue Egg Leadership, and what is it that you guys do for your clients?
The name came up with from the idea if you put blue and you put an egg together, people cannot not connect those two. It's kind of a psychology thing. Also, blue means development, unlimited development. And so we said that is a nice play in psychology for a company. And what we do is we work with entrepreneurs 1 to 20 million. We moved out of corporate and really serve that population. So they're coaches, solopreneurs, and entrepreneurs. And our services are masterminds and individual coaching. Those is where we thrive. We have developed mind framing, stroke of genius, and several other new one, mind shift labs, to really help clients move through the neuroscience of change. That's what we love doing, is bringing in neuroscience. How can we understand change? How do we understand neural language, and moving you through that with the best research out there.
Before we hit record, you shared something you saw in the news, how corporations are replacing lots of corporate coaches with AI. Can you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, you and I were having the discussion. Something for coaches to be aware of, and they obviously are having these discussions, is the whole concept of AI. But in a mastermind, I recently heard that a couple larger corporate corporations are thinking of creating an AI or getting an AI coach and actually instituting that instead of providing coaching for their clients. Right. And so it's a platform, it's out there, it's a real thing happening in corporate America. To what extent? It's a cheaper way, I suppose, but what extent it grows, it'd be something that coaches want to be aware of and navigate from that. We know, we really want to separate ourselves from that platform, obviously, and that's where we want to think about pivoting now. Coaching has such a dynamic field. I started in 2000 trying to prove that it didn't work, and that's what I did my dissertation on, is I don't know if coaching works, and found out there the framework, and a coach that's actually trained in coaching can listen at level 3, can work with our memory systems, can really get us unstuck, but they have a whole set of tools. And so the AI discussion is a live one, and that's interesting, and also something coaches really need to think now. How do I separate myself from that world? Oh, but then how do I use it too, right, Morris? Like, there's certain things we want to be able to access with AI.
Yeah, I also have a client. He wrote a book, and now he's building, it's almost done actually, an AI that's trained on his book, and it literally is a business coaching AI.
Wow.
But what you've just described, I'm literally seeing how that's being built behind the scenes right now. And the question of how is a human coach different from the AI platform? And I like that you said platform, but it's such a important conversation. At the same time, I think it's the oldest conversation in business. It's how to stand out.
And coaches are famously known not to really know how to stand out. They're such service oriented people. But the fact that you're saying that more and more, like even coaches are using AI in that way, it does mean you really want to think about what are the 3 things that you can offer a client that a platform can't. And you need to be clear about that, because people still are ambiguous about what coaching is. Although coaching has been studied, we know there's a framework. They know that they can actively listen. They have, whether they have NLP tools, they have neuroscience tools, whatever their tools are, it is a position or a career that requires those strategies. And then there's also a group of coaches that don't have them that coach. So you really, one thing that you can do is distinguish yourself from, is asking yourself, what are the 3 things that I offer? And again, it's nice to have you one unique selling position, but how do I reach that uniquely from a platform, or even for another coach? Um, the world of coaching with corporate now wants certified coaches, ICF certified coaches. So that's one way to distinguish yourself, is that you're saying, I have a set of tools that actually am trained to move the brain forward. I'm trained to unhook someone. I'm trained to listen at a level they can't hear for themselves. That right there distinguishes you from a platform. Are you going to be available 24 hours? No. But that also helps people to understand coaching is not saying you're in a crisis. It's saying you have all the resources to get through this. I'm here to help you navigate that.
You mentioned earlier that you wrote a dissertation to prove that coaching doesn't work. What was your major that you wrote the dissertation?
I started in science, pre-med, and then I went into leadership. I started with the embassy and really got fascinated in leadership. So when I went to my second graduate degree, is leadership and human science, because I thought they came together really well. And one of the areas that leadership was talking about, not only, what is effective leadership versus management, but it was this concept that started in the late 90s, coaching. And I had read some books on it, and at that time it was newer. And so I wanted to create it was the first quantified, qualified, so mixed methods, it's called, framework for coaching. Does it really make a difference? Is it actually a structure? And so I went in there saying it's really kind of airy fairy. It's not going to have any grit.
Is that like saying the hypothesis you going into the dissertation was that coaching is more placebo than structure?
Yeah, well, the hypothesis is coaching is more, well, it's not as much placebo. It doesn't have the structure of a real career. You can't separate a coach out from a consultant, from a counselor, right?
Ah, okay.
I thought there was not enough structure. And so, but researching, and I had the privilege of talking to Marshall Goldsmith, which many people have read his book. He's a phenomenal coach, phenomenal consultant. He separates the two very distinguishably. But through that research, you interview people, then you create a interview platform that you question, and you put it's Delphi is what it's called. And so as I started questioning and having these coaches across the nation, some international, it became very valid that there is a very specific structure to coaching. Not only that, they could report results that were because of the interaction between them and the client using the tools.
How are the results that a coach produces different from the results that a consultant or a teacher produces?
Oh, that's a very good question. So, like in teaching, the results is a grade, right? A student would get A, B, C, or D. They don't measure behavioral change. They don't measure anything of that sort,
Ah,
right? A
hmm.
consultant measures profit, fiscal, change in numbers of people, but it's usually profitability or transfer of expertise. A coach is different, in it's the behavioral pieces. So I like using like Baron's emotional intelligence quotient. It's a rigorous, it's been tested. It tells me that when the clients came in here, let's say they had a 70 on this whole inventory of how they interacted with people, how they led people, how they made decisions. And through our program, they ended here, at this point, 80,
Hmm.
right? So that's how they measure. It's what were the specific behavioral growth, and then also the expertise as they intersect it with other people. So it's not, we also indirectly, how did their business grow? Like my clients, if they go from 1 million to 3 million, I count that as an indicator. But a lot of it's interactions, behavioral, and freedom of mind, time, and money.
So if we take, let's take content marketing, like social media marketing as an example.
Okay. All right.
Let's say a client, um, they have a lot of anxiety around showing up on camera, posting content, sharing more of themselves on social media.
Okay.
As a coach, you would help them change the behavior to actually go out and do that. However, as a consultant, you would maybe question, is social media the biggest driver of revenue for your business, or should you maybe go to paid ads? Would that be a good way of comparing the two?
I think that's one way, because as a consultant, if I go into a consultant role, it's like, is the action beneficial? That's what you're saying, right? And did you take the action? So sometimes you have consultants that say they're coaching, and what they'll do is, you need to take this action or you don't need to take that action. And coaching is the action for you? And this, if it is, let's get through your barriers to that action. Because any change, and then like a neuroscience coach, we say any change is going to hit the part of your brain called the basal ganglia. It's going to say, don't do it. Just don't, because you haven't done it. So we want to ask, is it aligned with where you want to go? So we ask the deeper questions, and it's more of, do we want to change this narrative, or this is not a fit for you? Does that help distinguish that a little bit?
Yeah, that's great. And one thing you mentioned is that most people, even high performers, they get stuck.
Yes. Yeah.
So is that what you do at Blue Egg Leadership? Is you work a lot on helping people get unstuck?
Yeah. Well, we found that that is a big trend with high achievers, solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, but there are 5 stuck cycles that we have researched, and it looks different for different people, but it really is part of their growth. But most people will get in a stuck cycle and not realize they're in there, and they could be in there for 6 months in a business. Coaches, we see this with a lot too. They're in a stuck cycle. So it could be a stuck cycle that is an emotional. It could be a stuck cycle that is more of, not, we call it lack of boundary setting, stuck cycle. Procrastination or an imposter syndrome is a stuck cycle, and decision paralysis and burnout. So what we do is, so a difference of a coach, they would try to get under what is the suck cycle that's hitting you. And sometimes I have a new client that has 3 of them. Just, they didn't realize it. They have decision fatigue, right? So then they also have the over commitment, so they have the burnout. So some of those like layer, so we distinguish them. That helps our brain say, okay, I can, these are just things in life. I don't have to take them personally. And we help navigate them. We find that they are a true thing. And then, but the more you can learn about them, and then each of them are a little different. So they have different tools for them. So then we can help them with that specific area. Like, for example, burnout. One really cool tool that we like to use is an ask request matrix. It's a tool that says, okay, so then what do you have to stop taking on? And then we go through very thoughtful questions about being in line with why you taking these things on when you really can't. So those are some examples. But yeah, we love working with the stuck cycles and bringing in the brain science with that. Like, all the stuck cycles are a midbrain reaction, right? So it means you're going to fight, flight, or freeze. So, right? So you're in there, and then you probably heard this working with different clients and coaches that come up. I don't know how to do this, so I'm not sure that I'll ever do it. Then their thought pattern gets in that I can't do it. Um, and then that takes their energy down, and therefore then they won't do something that's probably very good for them, right? So that's kind of just like a brief piece of the power of a stuck cycle and why we really love navigating people through that.
And I saw on your website that one of the resources you offer is a kind of self-assessment where people can check which symptoms they have or which stock cycles apply to them. And what I didn't know is at first I thought it was one of the 5 most common stock cycles. But now I just understood that I could have 3, 4, or maybe even all 5 of the stock cycles.
You can, but it'll list out. So of the 5, like I say, the client I had, one was very low, but her first one, that emotional flatlining, she was just flat. Couldn't give anything to her family. That was very high. So when there's like two that are high, then we deal with the two. But it inventories what one probably is the one that we're going to deal with first. And then it also says, well, this one is you're fine with that area, so just move on from that. And then it gives you a couple strategies to get started. Because when we get in a stuck cycle, that's what happens. We freeze or we fight or we flight. We want to slow it down and say, but we know this. We've researched this. Do this. Start with the one that's the highest, just like in emotional intelligence, we start with the lowest. The one is the highest, and then we start navigating from that.
I want to talk a bit more about competition with AI, but before we do that, where can people go to take the stock cycle assessment?
So you go to Blue Egg Leadership / resources, plural, and go ahead, click on it. It's a free inventory. It's just going to walk you through some questions, and then it will explain, here's probably your first step and 3 actions you can take, because 3 is a very good doable actions.
And I will also link to that in the description below this video on YouTube and Spotify, iTunes, everywhere. If you listen to this or watch this, the link will be below. So, Denise, what do you recommend to coaches, particularly, to stand out in the age of rising AI?
Yeah, so I think one is really hone in how you can embody that psychological safety with your clients. Like, get really good at the edge of your powerful questioning. What can you create for your client that's dynamic that will AI won't be able to compete with? Because even if you ask AI, what can't you do? It'll say nothing emotional, nothing about safety. So um, the other piece that Morris is important is also, if you're like a specialist, for example, I love neuroscience, you really have to set yourself apart with trademarking your going through IP and trademarking your tools, setting them apart so that they just don't get in the norm of like, this is all free information, because your expertise needs to be known. That's your expertise, that somebody just didn't look it up on AI, right? And so coaches really can do that, especially if you're an inventive coach. There's a really cool inventory you can take to figure out what level you are. I'm called Working Genius. But if you're an inventive coach, this would be the year to say, I'm going to start my IP. I'm going to really hone in on what separates me in the interactions I do, and then also what can you do with an individual or group that is unique, that you might have not thought of, that they're needing. Because another thing that AI cannot do is there are so many coaches, solopreneurs, and entrepreneurs that feel alone. And they love when you put them together and they can discuss and share that, especially when the economy goes up and down. That is something you can do separately as a coach, is create that space with several people together in a way that they feel very loyal to that space, very connected in that space.
What would be an example of how a coach could start their own IP? If let's take, for example, we take a retirement coach.
Okay, so if it's a retirement coach, so we know copyright, like if you wrote something and it was, 2020, let's say, you put that copyright statement. If you didn't, that's probably important you do that. But you can go on the trademark website and look through the steps. But the first step you would do is, let's say it's a tool. You're going to want to put that tool together in a format that is unique to you. And then start with the TM, and then start researching what design looks different than other coaches. Like when we trademark our tools, the way it's set up is one, it's branded. So brand it, that's one thing. And then the second thing would be is make sure it's clean, concise, and every question on there is a powerful question. It doesn't just say, what is an insight? That's that's not going to set you apart. So look at the things that you're doing with retirement and ask yourself, what are the most powerful questions in that? And then make sure the tool has a name, right? Like we have the stuck cycle diagnostic, right? Or we also have the delegation guilt technique. We have a tool has every purpose. So they want to make sure, what does the tool do that separates them, and how can those questions be most powerful? Because usually it's only one or two sides. You won't get through trademark if it's a big, long dialogue.
So essentially, what I'm hearing is that we create a process or a framework to navigate certain challenges, as we often do with clients, and then we give it a name, we brand it, and then we can register that as an IP.
Yeah, so you can put copyright, but if when you get to a tool, put the TM, right? And then you can go through the process, and that's harder. That's more work, but you're putting the TM even if you start with that, then you're saying this tool has its own trademark. I have these tools. Yeah, it's a very, very thoughtful process, but it, again, more so like you said, it sets you apart, and AI can't just pull it. It will pull the TM from there. Then you can go ahead and register. Usually register a batch of tools, and that's the kind of the learning process that you would go through, but that's where you would start. Yeah.
Got it. So it doesn't need to be registered from the get-go. It's about trademarking it, adding the TM, adding the copyright, and then AI can just use your trademarked processes. And if it mentions it, then it will refer to the coach. It will say, according to Dr. D, the stock cycle process is these steps, right? And so then essentially the AI would be promoting you because you have a trademarked process.
Yeah, and that's intent. It's supposed to. If people are different. So the other piece is, of course, you want to put that copyright statement at the bottom of every tool, and that it cannot be reproduced. And that actually AI can help you write, or you can go to the trademark website. So that's how you can use AMAR. You just say, please put a copyright for a trademark, and it'll write it up. But yeah, so then that becomes your property. Let's say you want to sell it down the road in a workbook. You could do that. Let's say you sell your company. You sell the company and saying, we are known for these tools. These are our IP. And you can later on, like I said, you can publish that in something of a workbook, or you already talked about coaches writing a book and then doing it the other way too. But that is a very easy process for coaches to really start thinking about, this is where I want to focus, and this is how I stand out.
Yeah, I can hear it in your language too, where you're unique in the sense that you embrace the scientific approach, and you've mentioned already a few times that you've researched something. For example, you've researched the stock cycles and you identified the 5 most common stock cycles. That already sets you apart, and we all can find our own methodology, trademark it, find our own unique approach, and that will set us apart, not just from other coaches, but also from AI.
Yeah, and it'll really set you apart for a long time, because then you can build on that. And the other things, that's what people are looking for, is how you're slightly different. So it's not science, because I love science. Science comes easy. Research comes easy. Then find out is it more a creative thing, and then do a creative IP and go that way. But yeah, it's really what we need to do, instead of trying to do everything for everyone. Start honing on the thing that you do well in whoever you work with, and how can you build on that this year and make it clear.
And thank you for highlighting that. In your case, the scientific approach aligns with you, but that doesn't mean everyone needs a scientific approach. There are so many unique ways of doing things. Like you said, there can be creative approaches, there can be spiritual approaches.
Yes.
I'm running out of examples, but what we all have our unique background.
Yeah. Another way, as Maurice, you're thinking about what they can do, and this is what I started very early on and have been for the last decade, is with continued referrals, is show them through something in your approach. No matter what, there are some well-researched inventories that you can layer in. Like I do a lot for Center for Creative Leadership, because they've created these best inventories. I'm working with leaders, but it gives your practice a little more rigor. So you can say, yes, I'm ICF certified in, let's say it's neuro language, but then share some ways that you measure. How do you measure change for them? Because that, I think, is going to be required more, also with AI. And some coaches don't know how to do that. They're like, I just show up for the client. I get that. But they're also going to need to know, why would I do that when I actually can possibly do this cheaper thing? So what is it about being in your presence, and then how do you help them measure it? So it's not a, what did you say, a placebo effect. It's a very integrative, and there's so many people that invent the tools, you don't even have to do that. Just incorporate them.
What is your approach that is based on neuroscience? Can you share a bit more about it?
Yeah. Well, I started off in science, so it's always something I'm fascinated. So what I do is anything. So I write for Forbes leadership too, and so one of the things there is, if you write for it, it's your own authentic. You sign off, it's your own content, and so we want to make sure, want to add some rigor to that. That there's research around there. So with the neuroscience piece, I've done a lot of coaching training, but I will read, like, when I started noticing a pattern like 7 years ago, 6 years ago, about this stuck cycles, I went to the research and I said, is this a real thing? Just kind of like I did in my thesis. Is this a real thing? How are they identifying it? And then I take that and I go to the neuroscience articles. There's some of my favorite ones that I just can pull down and correlate that. So where in the brain do these happen? Like, you probably see a brain behind me. I've taken classes just on neurobiology of brain, because for me that fascinates me. That, oh wow, it is a midbrain thing, and it happens here in the ventricular. It happens in the amygdala, and then it goes here. It helps me to understand the wave that it will affect the person. So I will show them. We'll get started with the self-awareness of a stuck cycle. Then I'll say the science behind a stuck cycle, where it happens in our brain. And actually, we have three brains: the head, heart, and gut. So I've studied that with Christoph Snyder. By the way, he's awesome. Um, and I'll take the science and say, this is how it fits with the science of it. And so they can be a little more objective. Like, it's not about me, it's about the science of, when people hear the word, you should have done this, it'll trigger the amygdala. But when they hear, that is interesting, it'll trigger the PFC. So mine is tying those together. What's psychology say, but then what does science say? And then can I apply that in a coaching process? So I put those three together like that.
That is fascinating. It definitely makes you unique. I've never heard anyone talk about it like that. And also, you implemented methods to measure the progress.
Here's something as a coach, there are personalities that will study one thing, and I tell my clients this, they'll study one thing, and I love them because they'll study that one thing forever and they'll make a tool out of it. So I don't have to always invent my own tools, like a bar on EQI. That's been studied for 40 years, right? And but I will use that, and maybe the architect from Voices, and then I'll create another one where it's a post and pre, which is the inventory on these things. How did you rate yourself before this? How did you rate yourself after? And then have somebody else rate it. So like a 180. So it's not just self raters. Um, so it's kind of like a three part system that they have, covering, so they can validate themselves. Yes, I did. Yes, I rated myself differently, but so did somebody else, and so do these two tools that are known for the validity and um, quality. So that to me is fascinating, but also gets them something solid.
Dr. D, this is incredible. How can people reach out to you? What is the best way to start working with you or learn more about your neuroscientific approach?
Email me directly and just say you're with Morris and you were listening to this show, and I will look at that email and we'll set something up, and I'll just ask you, what is one thing that you want to work on right now? So my direct email is Denise at blueeggleadership.com. And I have a Calendly link. You just can click on there below, or just reach out. I am very good at emailing back within, 5 or 6 hours. So I would love to hear from you, because we want everybody to be unstuck. And I will talk about the different options that we have there. Or there's free resources too, as we said before. But we want to be a little more active, just because of the dynamic of everything shifting with technology. So I do encourage people, go to your resources and do something uncomfortable. and figure out how to, this is the quarter now, and this is the time to really think about, I really need to be clear how I stand out and be happy with the route that you choose.
Thank you so much, Dr. D. I appreciate all your insights and the conversation.
Thank you, Morris. This was a wonderful conversation and an important one.